Welcome back to the latest edition of the Saints Insider Podcast. I am Luke Johnson, filling in as host today. I'm joined by Rod Walker, Matthew Paris, and Jeff Duncan. It is Wednesday, April 2nd. Thankfully, no April Fool's jokes today, right? Right?
Yeah,
I'm looking at you.
I like that one. I don't know if it's real. I saw it on social media, so it definitely could be fake.
Wow.
That's just any day.
I can't
The
wait to see
American
where this
quarter
goes.
instead of the French quarter. That was funny. I thought that was actually good.
I didn't see that.
I didn't see that.
Called
I
American
saw
quarter.
Jason Whitlock got by Tiger Woods.
Oh, he did?
Yeah. Tiger's like,
You got Tigers.
hey, I know I tore my Achilles a month ago, but like my explosive training regimen has made me ready to play in the Masters. And Jason Whitlock's like, wow, amazing, you're the best. Anyways, none of that here. We are going to give you the straight dope. All right, Matt. Matt was just over at the owners' meetings in West Palm Beach, enjoying a little sunshine, a little beach time, maybe a little personal time with Kellen Moore. I'm sure had fascinating things to say. We're going to get into that, what Matt learned from his time in West Palm, what kind of changes the NFL has in store for the 2025 season. And then we are going to dive deep into quarterbacks today, which has been a topic of conversation basically ever since pro days have started. The Saints have been all over the country looking at some of these guys, sitting down and having personal interviews with some of these guys. So we'll dive all into that. But first, fellas, how we doing? I want to know how you're doing, Rod. Look, spending all that time around the Pels, it's not good for a person's
We're in the
psyche.
home stretch, man. We're 6 games out, so it's almost over.
Almost over.
Rod knows what it's like to say in the latter days of covered like the Montreal Expos for a year. He's kind of
Just sitting in a stadium with 12 of your closest friends.
right.
The 12.
they
Rod.
throw in airplanes from the upper deck, see if it can reach the court.
Between two teams, I've seen 26 total wins. So.
A lot of losses.
That's I was just about to ask you that. You need to calculate like the win-loss percentage of this past year of the games you've been at.
Yeah, and I don't know about the whole. Yeah, I haven't broken it down like home games yet. So as far as like games I actually saw in person, it's probably
26 out of 99, right? 17 and 82. I guess I haven't played a full
they haven't
82
played a while,
games.
but that's probably where it's going to be. they probably
You
won't
should
win
be
enough,
filing
so.
for hazard pay. You should talk to Renee or
And that ties the record, 2014 also, Saints went 8-8, Pelicans went 18-64. So
Hope springs eternal out here. All right.
fail for flag, baby.
Let's
Fail
look
for
ahead for
flag.
maybe some better days. I don't know if we're going to be able to squeeze any optimism out of anybody. But Matt, I want to start with you. Look, the league meetings were this week. The Saints had Kellen Moore was there, Kai Harley was there, Dennis Lauscha was there, team president. I'm assuming, did Gail make the trip?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't see her personally, but I ran into another reporter who saw her. So
All right.
secondhand verification.
Boot leather reporting right there. I
Yeah.
love it. Okay, so let's get into look. There were some broader league-wide takeaways. Let's kind of get into them specifically. I wish we could call this the brotherly shove. I think that's what it should be called, but commonly known as the tush push. I'm sure you've heard those words way too many times in the last
Even
several
before
days.
the play.
Okay, so what can you tell us about where the league's at on that? I know it was the Green Bay Packers had proposed a rule change outlawing it, and it seems kind of divided as of things right now.
Yeah, the NFL are cowards, and they're trying to get this banned, even though it seems like it's about half and half. What they did, which is why I kind of joked that they were cowards, is I don't think they had the votes for it, so they said, all right, let's table this until May, a.k.a. let's try and see if we can convince 8 more teams to come on our side to ban it, because being at Roger Goodell's presser yesterday kind of seemed like he was in favor of banning it. The people who want to ban it, I think, are a lot more vocal, coming up with health and safety reasons, even though the data isn't really there. Personally, I mean, I think, you should be focused on stopping it. I think teams are completely targeting the Eagles here, and because they've had so much success with it, because it's something that Kellen Moore was saying yesterday, is that, other teams have tried to implement it and aren't nearly as successful with the play. And so, they are tabling it. They're going to talk about it in May. I kind of think it's going to get banned just based on, like, the fact that they are putting this off longer to do more research. But I don't know. I think it's a play that really works with them, and I don't think it's any more dangerous than crashing into the line in short yardage situations anyway, like with fullback dives, quarterback sneaks. I mean, I guess there's that pushing element, but
Well, and I think one of the things that's intriguing about it, I'm with you on this. I think it's just it's a play that one team has mastered, and it's been a competitive advantage. Even though other teams have tried, they haven't been able to really replicate it. But I do think that it is interesting from a Saints perspective because Kellen Moore obviously was there. This is something that could potentially impact the Saints, even though we haven't really seen the Saints do this sort of thing since Philly brought it out.
No, but I could see Taysom Hill, for instance, checking into the game
Sure.
and being the quarterback. That's exactly the kind of play I think you could run. But I'm with
Trevor
Matt.
Penning at fullback.
Yeah, I'm with Matt, man. I mean, I thought Pete Carroll said it well. Like, what's the difference between that and we see it every game where the guy's 5 yards downfield and the offensive line comes up behind him and pushes, and sometimes they push him 10 yards and gain. That's the same thing. Are you going to outlaw that? I guess you'd have to. At some point, like, where does it stop? I just feel like it's sour grapes. Can't stop it.
I'm not a big fan of changing something just because teams can't stop it. I mean, I don't agree with it. I didn't think baseball should have got rid of the
shift.
The shift, yeah. I'm okay with it, but I know it's probably.
Yeah, I would say the difference there.
Here we go, can of worms.
Yeah, that's.
Don't get me started on the shift. I hate the shift.
Oh,
Go on.
You probably hate the Brewers pitching staff at the moment
I
too.
sure do.
I would say the difference with the shift and this play is the watchability factor. Like, sports is entertainment first and foremost. And so the shift, I think, was really slowing down the game, really kind of making it not as entertaining to watch. And I don't know, I think the tush push is kind of cool. Like, I like seeing the physicality of it. It doesn't happen that often. I mean, I think even the Eagles, they ran the most plays, but we're talking about maybe close to 200. So it happens once, couple, not once a game, more than that, but it's not as prevalent as, say, the shift was, or you think about in the early 2000s when they banned hand checking in the NBA. Like that, you've got to find that balance, and I just don't think in this case it falls to that level.
Yeah, the infield shift was changing the way people play the game, right?
Yeah.
It was okay. Teams are basically taking away like a ball in play, right? Because data tells you that a right-handed hitter is going to bring the ball on the left side of the infield more often than not. So players start trying to hit the ball up in the air. You start seeing a lot more strikeouts, a lot more walks. The game becomes boring that way. This is just one team getting really, really good at one thing that everybody else has available to them, and nobody else can seem to find that same magic that Philly has. I'm totally with you on that.
But what I think they're doing, this is just me surmising, is they're trying to stop it before it becomes something bigger. And that's what usually a lot of these NFL rules are about, is like
nipping it in the bud.
Right.
Yeah.
Before it becomes like all of a sudden full-on rugby scrum. Let's just get a bunch of Jordan Mailata guys and we'll just run this big wedge like back in the – that's how football started.
Just start scouring New Zealand looking for the next.
And then just put
It's
them
like
around.
Purdue with big centers.
I could see something like that becoming, like going back to the old prehistoric days of football.
Yeah.
I think it's something to do more with that because it's like Matt said, it's entertainment. And right now you got this free-flowing game, passing game, and it's exciting, and slowly scores are going back down.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, that was one of the things I was curious about, and I asked Kellen Moore this, is do you actually have the personnel here to run that play? And he said, I don't know, we'll have to see. But he also said, well, the Eagles, they spend so much time working on that play.
Yeah.
And so if I were to infer from those comments, I don't know if he thinks the juice would be worth the squeeze, given, you can't really rely on Taysom anyway, just because of the health factor there. And then do you want Derek Carr doing it? I don't know if he has. Okay. I know he doesn't have the explosiveness in his legs that Jalen Hurts does, let alone the line itself is way different here. So, I mean, I think there may be situations where they could try it, but if they do, it's not going to be nearly as successful as Philly does.
Unless they draft Tyler Warren and they can put him under center. Okay, let's work through the other ones really quickly. Overtime changes. Can you kind of run through?
Yeah, both teams are going to get the ball.
It's the postseason overtime rules.
Yeah, they just adopted that, but unlike the postseason, which is 15 minutes, it's 10 minutes in the regular season still. So it'll be interesting. Like someone brought up on the radio to me yesterday of what if, that the first team eats all the 10 minutes and then like they score. Does the second team still get an untimed possession? I don't know.
Yeah, that is a really interesting because like a 10-minute drive is it's crazy, but it's not completely unheard of. We've seen teams bleed off 14, 15 play drives. So this is a change where if an NFL team scores a touchdown on the opening drive, the other team still gets a chance to answer.
Correct.
Okay. So we all in favor of that?
Yeah. Sure.
Yep. Okay. Mark it down. Kickoff rule. I think the only change was that touchbacks now go to the 35-yard line, correct?
Yeah, this is something that just listening to Darren Rizzi last year, it was so obvious that's what he wanted all along.
Right.
When they made this kickoff originally, they intended it to be on the 35, and then some teams were like, well, maybe that's too much. But basically what this change is they only had 20% returns last year, I think is the number somewhere in there. They anticipate now moving it up 5 yards that they're going to see returns in the 60 to 70% range. So they're hoping it really juices the numbers, and we'll see.
Yeah,
If you
that
want
makes
like
sense.
all right. I would say if you want like a 30-minute breakdown, it's just tune into the Broncos special teams press availability.
I'm sure he's going to have a thing or two to say about it. Good old Darren Rizzi. What were you going to say, Jeff?
No, I was just saying. I think that's a good move to get more. They're trying to get the return back into the game, and so it makes sense to me. All these rule changes actually make sense, except the tush push.
It should have been implemented last year.
Right.
Like if you're going to make the rule change, make it because like you saw the potential for that kickoff rule to be really good, and I think we saw some good results from it. But teams were like, why am I going to give them an opportunity to return the ball? I mean, we saw some teams get really good at kind of minimizing. I think the Saints did a really good job.
Really good at
for the most part until Riz took over as the interim head coach, of kicking it within the landing zone and going down there and making a tackle like shy of the 25. I think this is going to eliminate a lot of those just like automatic touchbacks. Teams not even wanting to deal with that because, I mean, you start at the 35 for NFL kickers. I mean, you're within 30 yards of field goal range.
Totally.
You don't have to do much to score. So yeah, I'm with all those rule changes. Anything else come out just like from a Saints specific? We'll avoid the quarterbacks. We're going to get on that in a second. But
yeah, just for relating to the rules and the Saints, they tabled the seeding discussion that the Lions proposed, where basically the Lions suggested like, hey, just because you win your division doesn't mean you should be guaranteed a home game.
NFC South.
Yeah, that's how it would apply to the Saints. And I asked Sean Payton about it and Pete Carroll, and they both brought up the 2010-11 game of the Beastquake and Marshawn Lynch. Like that wouldn't have happened if the Lions had their way much earlier. So this gets talked about every so often, but it actually the league, I think, is a little bit more open to it based on maybe just the last few times they've had this conversation.
Right, and you've seen this happen a lot. Where I mean, last year, there were 2 14-3 teams in the NFC North. Yeah. Vikings end up having to go on the road for their first playoff game, and they lost. Correct, their first playoff game.
Yeah, to the Rams.
So, I am kind of for it. But at the same time, like I think the division has to mean something. Sometimes, I like we've seen like the Bucks in recent years have kind of a mass season and do some nice things in the playoffs. I think some of the bad division teams, some of that is an element of teams within the division kind of beating up on each other.
What about the biggest news to come out? The owners' meeting was the chain gang is eliminated.
Yeah,
I think we all agree on that, right? That was a good thing to embrace the new technology.
They're still going to be there.
It didn't sound like though they're going to do it on punts on the sideline, right? They're not implementing it there. It's just the using that
downs.
Hawkeye
Yeah.
for first downs.
Yeah.
Maybe eventually they get to that, but I know that's always been
This game
joke.
This game's been played for 120 years, and we're
Still bringing it up.
we've got the point where our AI overlords are already arriving here, and we're still relying on some 60-year-old dude to be like, no, it was right there, and then we're gonna move the ball from right there to right there on the hash, and then we're gonna bring these chains in, and that's exactly where it's this short.
right.
Like what?
The paper card
Yeah.
thing from a few
Peyton
years.
always used to laugh about on that same joke about how he goes, I'm still throwing a red sandbag to designate a rule challenge or a replay challenge. He goes, can't we have something a little more modern?
No,
than
we're
that?
living in an analog world in the NFL.
The best was
They can't-
Dennis
they can't
Allen's
afford it.
fast throw.
I know, but they told him at the league office that they think it makes good theater on TV. Like it looks good to see that flag going out there.
No, it's really the best when you get one that a coach is just absolutely disgusted with a call,
Right.
and he just slams it down. At the
That's what I
right.
think they
Yeah.
like.
Yeah, of
Because
course.
if they just
No,
have a
it's
little
great.
button, like a little, it's
No.
not going to have the same these guys
Right.
going
no,
up and.
look. While they may not have devoted the money and the resources to the technology in the NFL, they sure as hell have done it to the cameras in the NFL. You get
Right.
the super slow mo with the strain on the face, throwing a big flag. Peyton getting all pissed off at referees. That's the
and,
best.
And I think they obviously can do away with
course.
the beanbags, but they don't want to because it's.
I think they need to bring back the cords for the headphones and have a cord guy on the sideline too.
I love those guys.
Speaking of flags, this is my friend Ben Standig at the Athletic. He brought this point up.
Covers who?
The Washington Commanders. But we're at the owners' meetings. Been there before. Normally, Goodell. Basically, every time he gets up there, he's asked "Hey, why is the league on fire?" Dan Snyder this, Dan Snyder that. This year, there were more. The topic he got asked most about was flag football. This year, the Olympics, potential training, whether players would be able to participate, so on and so forth. It was very reflective of the state of the league, and
Kind of glad I missed that. To be honest with you.
well,
Would
we
not
can
have-
transition.
One would be enough for me. One flag football.
Oh, dude, there were 4 or 5. It was brutal.
Jesus.
But I think this is maybe a transition to the Saints too. Is I just don't think there's all that much happening in the NFL right now, and so
No controversy.
if sitting at Kellen Moore's roundtable yesterday, we spent a good 10 minutes asking him, hey, what's the play call language going to be like? It's, there's value in that, but it's not necessarily as much as hey, Derek Carr, does he want to be here? I mean, I did ask
you
that.
asked that.
I did ask that.
You
but
actually used that exact phrasing. Does he even want to be here?
I did, and he said, yeah, we're both excited to work together. So, solves that. No follow-ups needed?
No controversy.
Yeah, it's just a slow time for the Saints, and I think the NFL in general right now.
The NFL's got to be panicking about that. They're like, come on.
Well, the draft
Aaron
is-
Rodgers, delay your decision another 2 weeks.
The draft is next month,
Yeah.
so
All right. Let's transition. Let's talk about the quarterbacks and the Saints' current quarterback, the quarterbacks they could potentially take in this upcoming draft. We're going to talk through all of that in detail. First, we are going to take a quick break for a word from our sponsor. We'll be right back.
There's no better place to parlay than Caesars Sportsbook. With quick picks, you can tap right into pre-built, ready-to-bet parlays right from the home screen. And if you miss tip-off, no worries. You can play same-game parlays live during the action. Plus, it's never been easier to find and bet on the biggest matchups of the day, so you can keep up with all the action. Caesars Sportsbook, proud partner of the NBA and the only sportsbook app with Caesars Rewards. Download it today.
Should have told you that.
Welcome back, Duncan. Are you ever going to not talk when we're coming back from break? Come on, man.
People all want to know what we're talking about in that moment.
All right, we are going to talk a lot about quarterbacks right now. It's been kind of a theme of this Saints offseason so far since Kellen Moore has been hired, from the opening press conference where he gave kind of a lukewarm answer on Derek Carr to later on where he's standing behind him after they renegotiate the contract, and then pro days come and they're all over the country looking at different quarterbacks. So why so many quarterback visits? We've got Cam Ward in Miami. A lot of the Saints brass was there. Kellen Moore, both coordinators. Jeff Ireland, I believe, was there. plus a number of assistant coaches. There's a lot of good players from Miami, but there's one that everybody's got their eye on. They went straight from there to Texas. They had dinner with Quinn Ewers. They've visited Jackson Dart at Ole Miss. They went up to the Kellen Moore went up to the Ohio State Pro Day where Will Howard was quarterback. So, look, it's clearly something that they are looking into this year. And I'll start with you, Rod. What do you make of that? Is this just like the standard information gathering that teams do on prospects every year, and it's just more pronounced because of this kind of uncertain future the Saints have, or is this maybe a sign of some smoke being there?
No, I think with the Saints situation, I think quarterback is a position that maybe even not. I mean, I think that's something you got to be looking out for and kicking the tires on everything you can, and I think that's what they're doing here. But with Quinn Ewers, I mean, I think they were actually just asking him about Arches. What I think.
You think we can get him?
Yeah, but it's fascinating to think about that, right? Because it was 2 years ago that they signed Derek Carr to a $40 million a year contract, and then they turn around and draft Jake Haener in the 4th round, and then the very next year they draft Spencer Rattler in the 5th round. They've made more investment in this position in the last couple of years than they have really probably at any point in their history, right? I mean, they haven't really drafted very many quarterbacks, period. So it's a weird spot to be in.
Yeah, and going back even further than that, I mean, we know how hard they tried to get Deshaun Watson. I mean, so it's a position that clearly they feel like they probably haven't really addressed like they need to.
Yeah.
So I think they're just still doing that.
Well, what do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I would say the difference and why I believe there's kind of smoke here is that much like Jake Haener wasn't Clint Kubiak's guy that he had handpicked, Spencer Rattler isn't Kellen Moore's guy. And I think coaches, particularly ones from offensive backgrounds, and Kellen Moore is a former quarterback, he's going to want to mold his own protege a little bit. And with Derek Carr's situation being what it is, you've got to look for the future. You've got to try and plan this out. And even though I think the Saints are still optimistic on Spencer Rattler and what he maybe can develop into, I wouldn't blame them for trying to for Kellen Moore to try to find his own guy. And I think this is what the process is about, is exploring those angles, taking the time to see, hey, is there anyone worth here? Because I think even on draft night in the 1st round, like, there's scenarios where maybe Shedeur Sanders does fall to number 9 and you're staring at the decision. So you better be prepared. You better do your homework. And I think that this is what this process has been about.
Yeah, and I think, first of all, I'd say I think there is a little too much reading into the fact that they were at these. And if you look at those pro days on those days, those schools were where you were going to go.
Sure.
I mean, Kellen Moore's going to Miami because there's a bunch of great players in Miami. Same at Texas, Ohio State. So the brass on those days was going where the players are. And then he's a quarterback, a former quarterback, so he's going to talk to the quarterbacks.
Yeah.
So I
think Joel Thomas was their running backs coach was in Oregon, Boise, Arizona State, and Iowa.
That's where the running backs
all the running backs are. Yeah.
Yeah. So that I think everybody's reading maybe a little too much into it. But what Matt says, I think, is spot on. Kellen Moore is going to want to get his guy. I mean, it's just natural. Every coach is going to want to do that. He played quarterback. They've got a bunch of former quarterbacks on the staff, and they're doing their due diligence. And I think that's smart. I mean, you can never be out of the quarterback business in this league. I think look at some of the organizations we value the most or respect the most, get it wrong. The 49ers went all in on Trey Lance, and they ended up getting Brock Purdy, and it worked out. I think of the Eagles with Carson Wentz. I mean, look how much they invested in Carson Wentz and got it wrong. But then they kept working at it and got Jalen Hurts and got it right. I think back to RG3, wasn't the same draft?
Kirk Cousins.
Cousins. So
I didn't cover them that way.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you just keep grinding away until you land on, because it's such an important position. And I think that's what the Saints are doing here. Not to mention that, down the road, say Carr does stay another year. We all think this might be his last year, but you've got a report on these guys. You've got a feel for them down the road. I think the one thing that did come out of Kellen Moore's, otherwise vanilla press briefing with our local reporters, was he kept saying these guys develop late in their careers, and I think he's right about that. We see it all over the league with like Geno Smith and Sam Darnold and these guys, Baker Mayfield, that were perceived as kind of busts early in their careers, and now they're, respected starting quarterbacks in the league because it took them a while to develop in the league. So with that in mind, who's to say Will Howard doesn't end up being the Saints starter 5 years from now, and they know what they're getting in that guy. So anyway, my long rambling answer there.
Okay, well, one of the things that Kellen did say, and this is probably something that any coach ever is going to say, because nobody's going to take a, whatever on a draft class. I don't want to say the word that popped into my head. But he said he liked this quarterback class. Right? Which, like, whatever. Who knows if he's being honest?
Right. Yeah, I couldn't read into that.
But do you guys like this quarterback class? 'Cause
No.
I don't think I do.
No, after Cam Ward. And even Cam Ward, I think, has a little bit of a swing and miss potential there.
Right.
But he's clearly the most compelling, talented guy. And then after that, that's why I thought, sneak preview of our Saints Roundtable coming this weekend, sneaked a look at Duke's answer, and he had a great answer. He said, like, beyond Cam Ward, there's a lot of swing and miss there in the rest of the prospects, and they can't afford that right now. This isn't 2018 when they swung and missed on Marcus Davenport. They were one of the best, most talented teams in the league then. They could afford to go. They're trying to win a Super Bowl. They could afford that then. They cannot afford at number 9 to swing and miss.
I agree. And I think, as I said in that answer, I think there's, whether you're talking about Sanders, Dart, Ewers, Shuck, the kid from Louisville, Will Howard,
Jackson Dart.
Yeah, I think all of those guys have really serious, as all prospects do, right? But I think there's a lot. It's a really hard position to evaluate, and I think there's a lot more warts with some of these guys in this year's class, where if you would have put them in last year's class, I don't even think we're talking about first-round players.
Right.
So then again, I don't think we were doing that last year this time with Bo Nix, and he goes out there and has a great rookie season. So I think a lot of it depends on where you land as well. But like you brought up Cam Ward as being maybe the surest thing among that group. And I want to talk about him specifically because when they went to Miami, that was like, everybody started going like, oh, man, are they thinking about making a move? Let's talk about that because it was, 2 years ago, Carolina Panthers held the number 9 pick in the draft, which is what the Saints have, and they traded it to the Chicago Bears along with DJ Moore, their best offensive player at the time, their 2024 first-round pick, which turned into the number 1 overall pick, their 2023 second-round pick, and their 2025 second-round pick. So we're talking 2 years after this trade. They're still giving up high-level assets to get their guy at quarterback. Bryce Young has not played like a number 1 overall pick so far, and maybe he never will, but maybe part of that is because they shelled out so much, and you lose the ability to build around the guy. So, like, is Cam Ward a fantasy that people shouldn't even be entertaining? Should the Saints even be considering a move? You'd have to go up to number 1 to get him. You don't want to let the Chicago Bears or the New York Giants have a chance to draft him or the Cleveland Browns. I'm sorry, because they're gonna take him.
Yeah, I think the reason it's more of a fantasy is not because of the price that it would take to, or the price maybe the Saints would be willing to give up. I mean, I don't know for sure if they'd be comfortable trading like the exact same haul that Carolina got, but I think the biggest difference in this scenario is Tennessee really needs a quarterback.
Yeah.
Like Chicago at the time, they had Justin Fields. They moved on from him a year later, but like that was a chance to get Caleb Williams, and it had played itself out another year. Will Levis, I think they've seen enough there, even though he's still relatively young.
I think back on all the highlights of Brian Callahan just shouting at him like, "What are you doing?"
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think, the Titans are going to talk themselves into Cam Ward, and I don't think they have to. Like, I think Cam Ward's a good player. I think he's worthy of going first overall. Would he be behind Bo Nix and
Michael Penix?
Michael Penix, thank you. In last year's draft, yeah, probably, but you deal with the cards you're dealt, and I think this quarterback class is at least better than the 22 class, where you look back on that and that was oof.
Yeah.
And so you just don't, if you're the Titans specifically, you don't pass on the chance to draft a potential franchise quarterback. Like, you only get that chance once every so often. So I think they're going to do it, which would make trying to trade up for it even more complicated, I just don't think it's going to happen.
I'm not seeing the comments, but I'm guessing at Saints fan 42445 trade Derek Carr and a 2026 seventh for number 1 overall.
I got to say
that it totally happens.
I've looked at the comments a little recently on our shows. A lot of pro Derek. Like, good job, guys. A little bit more like, why do you hate Derek? So we've gone the other
is
way.
that from like Carrick Dar 84973?
Go Fresno State.
Number 4. No, but I mean,
David or Darren?
I think the only reason you would ever consider something like that is if you feel like, this is the absolute no-brainer, can't-miss guy, like a Joe Burrow,
Right.
someone of that level. And I don't think Cam Ward is that guy.
Yeah, I would agree with
So
that.
I think it's hard. I mean, Carolina clearly thought Bryce Young was. And look, when Bryce Young came out, a lot of people thought he was kind of a can't-miss. I don't think that's the case this year. And the Saints just, man, if they missed on that, I think it would have a Ricky Williams type of impact.
They would have to be utterly convinced that he's going to be a stud, and he's going to be a stud who can elevate the players around him.
Right,
because they would be resource poor for several years
And
after that.
Ditka thought that when they traded for Ricky Williams, who looked like as sure a thing as ever, right? And I remember my first year on the beat. This is how old I am, guys. Y'all probably weren't even born, 2000. But I was
7.
covering the team the first year in 2000 when Randy Mueller took over and Hazlitt. And they said the thing it hurt them with was what you're talking about, Luke. Their special teams were terrible. They couldn't fill in the depth on the roster because they had no draft picks. They couldn't get these young players that normally would be the role players that fill out your depth because they traded it all away. And it took them 2 or 3 years to kind of dig out from that because of the impact of that trade. It was. And look, they did a great job because they traded Ricky a year or two later and got 2 first-round picks for him. I mean, that was a great job by Randy Mueller just to kind of recover from that. Drafted Deuce, leading rusher in the history of the franchise, and got 2 first-round picks back. So I don't think this organization's in position for that right now.
Yeah, I agree, but I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, we don't know how strongly they feel about Cam Ward, but they'd have to really, really like him to make a move like that. But are we talking about Shador too, or is that later on? Or
Let's see. We'll talk about it a little bit later on.
Well, never mind. I'll save my thoughts on that part of it. But I don't think the Saints can really make that move. Again, unless Kellen Moore just knows that this is a guy that a can't miss guy. That's the only way you even consider doing that. But I just don't think they'll.
This is going to look awful in 5 years when Cam Ward's led the Titans to their 4th straight Super Bowl.
He's
We're all
next
like,
Mahomes.
giving up a 2026 first?
He's the next Mahomes.
Yeah,
That's what everybody's done with Lamar.
Right.
Now everybody's like revisionist history on Lamar. Like he had all kinds of questions coming
I just can't believe you wanted to move him to receiver. That's a terrible look by you.
No, I love Lamar Jackson, but I also, didn't know he'd be a 2-time MVP.
Right.
I mean, I had no idea.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even when they drafted, I remember I think they played a regular season game up there. That was when Justin Tucker missed the extra point and had the.
Yeah.
But they were trying to use him in like a Taysom Hill role in that game.
Right.
And Joe Flacco was a quarterback. I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's just put a pin in the Cam Ward discussion. When you were talking to Kellen about what is he looking for out of that position? Like what's like the ideal version of the quarterback for Kellen?
Hey, he said that he really stressed the classroom, wants to make sure that, basically these guys understand football. You watch a ton of tape. It wasn't like, didn't really get like too revealing on the type of like intangibles or even like the traits that he seeks. Like he didn't say like big arm or anything like that. Like he said there are certain, I think it wasn't checkpoints, but it was something like that that you look for. Like he kept it a little vague, but I mean the guy played quarterback all his life. Like he knows what he's looking for.
Yep. Yeah, I think he wants someone who can run the offense, obviously, and but you're right. The one question I had coming out of that was, how important does he think the intangibles are? because obviously, I mean, he had him in spades when he played. That's what you always hear about Kellen Moore was he was this great coach on the field, kind of guy that could lead the team. But I also thought it was interesting he brought up Bill Parcells' commandments just out of nowhere.
I thought of you
Unsolicited.
as soon as he said it.
Yeah, well, I mean, but that was interesting because a lot of those commandments of Parcells are intangibles, more so than big arm and stuff like that. That's what I inferred from it.
It's he's also had a fairly mobile quarterback at pretty much every step of the way. Like Dak's not like the big runner he was at Mississippi State, but he's still a guy who can move around the pocket. Justin Herbert is, as we saw last year, like a 40-yard run against the Saints. A lot more mobile than people want to give him credit for. And obviously Jalen Hurts last year, I mean, he's ran for like 15 touchdowns every year of his career. So, I am curious if that's like, if he's a 36-year-old coach and he's just grown up in the modern NFL, if when he's looking at quarterbacks, if that's part of the makeup that he wants.
Yeah, I think not necessarily just like scramble ability, but tempo. I mean, that's a thing that like someone who's a fast processor. We can get into Sanders in a little bit, but like that, I think that would be the argument for him is could he run Kellen Moore's offense? And I think he makes quick enough decisions he could.
And I think pretty much all coaches are kind of looking for, I mean, in this day and age in the NFL, that's kind of what you're looking for now, a guy who can move around. So
yeah. Okay, so let's see. Let's put you guys in the GM seat. You're there. Saints picking number 9. You didn't trade up. You're staying where you are. And everybody but Cam Ward is there at quarterback. Are you taking one? And I guess obviously this depends on who else is there, right? Like maybe they had like 4 guys they're targeting and all of them are gone. And then you're like, well, quarterback's there. But, just out of curiosity, if all of them are there except for Cam Ward, is it something you're considering? Are you taking it? Go with the Shedeur route. This is where I wanted to lead.
Yeah, that for me, and I've probably watched Shedeur more than anybody on here because I watched him.
Man,
a lot of late night texts from Rod.
I can't count the number of Sunday mornings. You're like, were you watching the Colorado game last night?
I mean, it goes back to Jackson State for me. I was watching him there too. But to me, if Shadeur's there at 9, if he falls that far, I just think it'll be one of those situations where we look back on him like, man, Saints could have had him and they didn't get him. I think he's very accurate. I mean, he completed 74% of his passes last year.
Yeah, led the NCAA.
But I think his toughness is what impressed me the most. I mean, he was playing behind a pretty bad offensive line at Colorado, especially his first year. That second year, the line got a little better. And, I mean, he took some licks and he just kept getting up and just making plays. And I don't know, I think he's a really good player. And I think he's a guy that some team, if he falls to 9, I think you're getting a good quarterback at 9.
So Rod would consider and maybe take Shedeur Sanders.
I would definitely take him.
You would take him. You would no hesitation.
I don't care who else is on the board.
No hesitation. How about you?
Yeah, I would consider him. I actually think the fit would be pretty good just because of the accuracy. I just think is really impressive, and it really felt like in the fall we were talking about like Sanders is the number 1 guy for most of it, and then Cam Ward just like is now the consensus number 1. When that happens, I just kind of think like, maybe the gap isn't as big as we think because there's been like this sudden change. And so that would intrigue me with it. Maybe you're getting a guy who's a little overlooked. But I just think where the Saints are at too and their needs, I'd still probably go pass rusher first, or even, if Tyler Warren. Like Sanders, I don't know would be like an immediate thing, but if he's the best player available, then yeah, I would take him. But I think I would go elsewhere first, but I wouldn't knock the pick by any means.
Yeah, I'd defer to Rod. I mean, you watched him more than I haven't watched him enough to have a feel. Like, I've watched Jackson Dart. There's no way I'd take him at number 9. No way.
Yeah, okay. So let's
none of those other guys.
Let's get off the Sanders discussion. Like Jackson Dart, Tyler Shuck.
Yeah, no.
None of the other guys you would consider at 9.
No, not even
because I'm with you on that. I wouldn't touch Jackson Dart at all. Right. Number 9.
No, he's got
if he's there in the second
Christian
round, like sure,
Ponder written all over him.
Yeah, Jake Locker. It's
that's what I feel like. That's what desperate bad organizations do. They draft guys like that in the first round, and they never get out of the cycle. But I'm not
I think
sure
the last
Shedeur.
time I saw Jackson Dart play in a college football game, he threw like 3 picks in a span of like 10 plays.
Yeah, I don't see the love for him at all.
Yeah.
Now, 40, I might consider it, but I don't even know if I'd do that. I mean, I think the Saints need to hit on these guys high. They can't afford. They need starting caliber players, unless they really feel like they've got Dak Prescott in the below the first round. Then I just don't see them doing it. I'm not sure any of those guys are, but I'll be honest with you, I thought Dak Prescott was going to be Dak Prescott
A lot of teams
when he
did.
came out.
It
So
was a 3rd-round pick.
yeah, so maybe they've got their eye on a guy. Maybe Will Howard. I never looked at him and thought, wow, that guy's going to be a really good quarterback.
Yeah, I didn't think he was an NFL player, honestly, watching him.
Me
And
either.
obviously, he played a lot better in the playoff, but
He did.
there's a lot of games where it was just, same thing with like Kyle McCord, who was at Ohio State before Will Howard, went to Syracuse, put up huge numbers. But I remember watching him at Ohio State. I'm like, man, he's got like 5 Maseratis on the field, and like he's not doing anything with it.
Agreed. I don't think any of those guys. I would be, and I do think from what I've read about Shedeur Sanders, I agree with Matt in that I think he would be a good fit in his offense. That's one thing I would say. He's gets the ball out. He's accurate. I mean, he manages the game. All the things. He's not as great an athlete as everybody thinks.
Yeah,
he's
he's
not
Deion,
Yeah, he's not
yeah,
Deion
he's
Sanders
not
at
Deion.
all.
Right.
He's a quarterback. Pocket quarterback can move, and you have to be able to move in this league. There's just too many great athletes on the field.
For me, there's concerns about Shedeur's arm.
Yeah.
His downfield arm. I think running a tempo offense, a quick offense, I think he could do that. But I think a vertical offense, there's concerns about it. And frankly, there's concerns about that everything else that you're bringing in.
Yeah.
Right. And other people might disagree with that, but it's a reality. If you're an NFL organization, you're bringing in a big time personality with it really comes in with his own brand. His dad is super vocal. His dad's going to be on Fox Sports talking about his son. You're bringing a lot of attention to you, and maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. It's like for me, I think that would make me at least take pause and consider. I don't know how you feel about that.
I think this city. I think he.
For the
do well
the
here.
city, 100%, 100%.
I don't think. I think Joe Burrow has a pretty big personality, and it's not as big as Shedeur.
Joe Burrow has a weird personality, though. Like, I don't know if Shedeur's buying a Batman car.
No, but I mean, he had that. He had some swagger.
Oh, 100%.
I mean,
I think it'll work. But
it's more the Deion factor for me. It's how, like, is he going to be hammering the Saints if Shedeur is sitting, like, by week 7? Like, what is that process going to be like? Or, how vocal is he going to be? We saw it in the NBA with LeVar Ball and his sons. Like, especially early on, LeVar was, I think, a distraction for Lonzo Ball in particular. I'm not going to knock a guy for supporting his son. Like that, I think LeVar Ball's a good dad by all accounts, but like there's just a time and a place to do it, and I don't know. We'll see. I think it has the potential to be a distraction, and if that scares some teams off,
yeah. And obviously, what we think about it doesn't matter at all.
Yeah. I mean, I would
Saints
look
could be
forward to
completely
Rod's weekly column with Deion's thoughts.
Yeah,
So.
yeah.
It gets some traffic, no doubt. Look, I think it all comes down. All what we're talking about this whole podcast comes down to what Kellen Moore and that staff thinks of their current quarterback situation. Really, how desperate are they? How much do they want to, have that long-term answer in place? And do they think they have to do it this year, or can they wait? I think all these questions we don't really know the answers to because they've kind of kept their cards close to the vest.
My guy, are you trying to set me up here for our final slide of the show?
Yes.
Let's talk about the bottom line for the Saints at quarterback. What does this all come down to? All right, look. They're obviously looking at the quarterbacks. We talked ad nauseum about these guys. There are going to be options there, whether it's all of them but Cam Ward, or whether they trade up to the number 1 pick, or whatever the case is. What is the current state of things at quarterback? Like, how do you guys view this? Is this really potentially something they add to this year? Is this going to be like the signal of the end of the Carr time here? Are his days really officially numbered. Like, how are you guys viewing this? Because I see it as, look, they've already restructured Derek Carr's contract. He is almost certainly going to be the guy in week 1 unless something really crazy happens, which is, I guess, technically a possibility. They'd be paying a lot of money to pay that for that guy to play somewhere else, but whatever. But I think there's legitimate questions about if this is going to be his kind of last hurrah here, his last year here. There's legitimate questions that you asked Kellen Moore about whether Derek even wants to be here, whether he feels valued by the organization. How would you guys kind of put a bow on this discussion and your final thoughts on this? We'll start with you, Rod.
For me, I'm just kind of looking forward. None of us have talked to Carr, haven't heard from him. I'm really curious to, for him to answer some of those questions. Does he want to be here? If he's happy here, I think that'll tell a lot about the direction of this team, the immediate future, and and beyond. So for me, that's what it comes down to.
You got some truth serum hanging out in your house? Just inject them with it real quick.
Yeah,
Fireside chats with Derek Carr.
I think he'll be straightforward when those questions are asked because he's going to. He knows that people are going to ask. Nobody's really heard from him. He did post on Instagram yesterday some gear he got from some golf company or something. But outside of that, we just don't really know much about what his thoughts are. There have been the reports that he wanted to be traded. We hadn't heard him say that. But I'd just like to know some answers to that.
Yeah, to me, it comes down to what is Derek Carr's relationship with the Saints right now, and if it's not great, how does that affect, just next season? Forget the future, just, does it loom over? It was just a really, if we go back to last season, I still don't understand why the Saints tried to make it seem so hard like Derek Carr was going to return from that injury. And I don't know if that was a Darren Rizzi thing. I don't know if that was what Derek Carr wanted them to put out there. But it was pretty clear that whoever was talking to, the national insiders about Derek Carr's injury and his timeline were not on the same page as what the Saints were trying to present publicly. And I think there was a weird clash regarding that. And I don't know if they're related or not, but I think that weirdness has carried over to this situation with this contract. And opting for a simple restructure was the most logical outcome. But the fact that he was open to a change of scenery reportedly, there's just a very weird vibe between the Saints and Derek Carr right now.
All right, Dunk, take us home, man.
Yeah, I think all these things are right. I also think there's a lot of speculation right now, a lot of people trying to read tea leaves and smoke signals. I agree with Rod. When he's here April 14th, assuming he does come in and report, we're going to get some answers. Because I think sometimes there's a lot of speculation about, for instance, the reported he's open to a trade. Well, that's totally different than saying you're demanding a trade. It's completely different.
Absolutely.
Teams do it. They did it with Matthew Stafford with the Rams this year. Kirk Cousins has gone through that this year with the Falcons. It goes on probably all the time that we don't even know about. So people are trying to read too much into that and taking the leap of saying he demanded a trade. That's different than, hey, well, let's see what's out there. Teams do that all the time. And then the other thing that I think people are taking a little bit of a leap on is the fact that he hasn't been around. It is a little weird, but Carr is kind of a weird bird. We know he's private with his family. He's very much that kind of guy. He's never been big on social media for the most part. So I think until we hear from him where things are, I think, I'm not willing to jump to this speculation. But I would say if the Saints do have a hostage situation with Derek Carr, they made their bed with it when they redid him a year ago, because now they handcuffed themselves to this contract. And that is the worst situation you could have. If he's not on board and he's the leader of your team, every player in that locker room is going to know it, and they're not going to buy in. And that's got to be, if that is the case, then that might explain why they're looking at quarterbacks right now. Maybe there is some smoke there to them knowing this, and they've got to get an answer to it. That's the only thing I would say about that.
All right. Well, the draft is 4 weeks from tomorrow. We should have answers by then. See what happens with the Saints quarterback situation. Maybe nothing.
Right.
That's all worth talking about. So we will be back on Friday with another show. Not exactly sure what our topic is, but we have a lot to get through with this draft. I think the Saints could legitimately take a guy from pretty much any position outside of specialist and fullback
Center,
in the
maybe.
first round of this draft. So we will be breaking that all down for you on Friday. And until then, thank you so much for being with us. If you're watching this on YouTube, rate us 5 stars. Send the link to your friends. Comment. Tell us how good we look. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get it, we appreciate y'all. We will be back on Friday, and stay tuned.